They didn't think it would matter. It was just a small gesture, a hand resting on a shoulder, a kiss behind the ear, a quiet closeness in the middle of the night. But for Margaret and Harold, both in their late 60s, married 42 years, that tiny moment changed everything. It wasn't the intimacy itself that harmed them. It was how they approached it, how they misunderstood what their bodies were trying to say, how they ignored a simple warning sign until it turned into something much harder to fix. Every year, more than 65,000 older adults in the U.S. experience injuries, hormonal crashes, or emotional trauma related to poorly understood intimacy issues. Yes, you read that right. It's not a statistic we like to talk about. It's hidden behind closed bedroom doors and tight-lipped conversations at the doctor's office. But as someone who has worked with thousands of older couples over the last 30 years, I can tell you, there is one silent mistake many make during intimacy after 60, and they don't even realize it's causing harm. And no, it's not about frequency. It's not about performance. It's about a habit most people think is normal, even romantic. But in reality, it places your heart, your nerves, and your trust at serious risk, especially after a certain age. So what is it? What's this subtle but dangerous habit during intimacy that doctors wish more seniors would talk about? And more importantly, how do you restore closeness without risking your health or emotional well-being? Before we go deeper, let me make you a promise. By the end of this video, you'll know how one overlooked reaction during intimacy can lead to elevated heart risk in seniors, why touch, pressure, and emotional signals feel different after 60, and what to do about it. And the simple shift that can transform not just your physical experience, but your connection with your partner. But first, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like your body betrayed you? Right in the middle of a moment that was supposed to bring you closer? Maybe it was a cramp. Maybe it was a racing heartbeat. Maybe it was the silence afterward that left you wondering if something was wrong. If that's ever happened to you, you're not alone. And it's not your fault. What's happening isn't a failure, it's a message. One that your body, your hormones, your nervous system has been trying to whisper to you for years. But most people never stop long enough to truly listen. Until now, because today, I want to walk with you through this. Not as a lecture, not as a warning meant to shame or scare, but as someone who has seen what happens when couples don't have this conversation, and what beautiful things unfold when they finally do. So before we dive into the first silent mistake, let me tell you a story about a man named David who thought he was doing everything right until one night, his wife started crying, not from pain, but from something even deeper. And what he learned that night, I believe every man and woman over 60 needs to hear. Are you ready? Let's begin. Mistake 1. Ignoring the body's subtle. No, David had always been attentive. At 67, he still reached for his wife's hand when they walked down the street, still made her tea just the way she liked it. 2 drops of honey, no more. And on Saturday evenings, when the house was quiet and the windows steamed from a warm bath, he would rest his hand on her back as she dried her hair. A quiet invitation, but that night, something was different. His wife, Clara, flinched, just slightly, almost imperceptibly. She tried to smile. She said nothing, but in her eyes, David saw something he hadn't seen before. Fear? No, not quite. More like hesitation, as if her body was trying to speak before her words could form. He moved away gently, wrapped his towel tighter around his waist, and said, "Are you okay?" She hesitated. And then, with trembling honesty, she whispered, "Sometimes I feel like my body says no, but I don't know how to tell you without breaking something between us." That moment stayed with David for weeks. He began to notice things he had overlooked. The way her shoulders tensed when he touched her lower back, the slight withdrawal in her breath, not from pain, but uncertainty. The way she avoided eye contact when he reached for her at night, not because she didn't love him, but because her body no longer reacted the way it used to. This right here is mistake number one. It's not the intimacy itself. It's not even the desire. It's ignoring the body's quiet signals, what I call the silent no. After 60, your nervous system changes. Nerve sensitivity declines. Hormonal shifts can cause dryness, tightness, or even delayed responses to touch. Blood flow isn't as strong or immediate as it was in your younger years. For women, estrogen loss changes the elasticity of tissues. For men, circulation and testosterone both impact arousal and recovery. These changes are natural, but when ignored, they create moments of silent disconnection. The body says, wait, slow down, not now. But the mind, so eager to maintain closeness, pushes past the signal. And when that happens repeatedly, even gently, even unintentionally, intimacy begins to carry micro-traumas. Not dramatic ones, just small frictions that slowly build up over time until one day, someone withdraws completely. It doesn't have to be this way. What I've seen again and again in my years as a physician working with older couples is this. When both partners learn to notice and respect the body's quiet messages, intimacy doesn't fade. It transforms. It becomes slower, deeper, more emotionally attuned. A hand on the back isn't just an invitation, it's a question. A moment of closeness isn't about expectation, it's about shared presence. And once that mindset shifts, the whole experience changes. David began doing something different. Each time he reached for Clara, he paused not to ask for permission like a stranger, but to give her space to respond authentically. Sometimes she stepped into his touch. Sometimes she didn't. But when she did, he could feel it. Fully, clearly, genuinely. No more second guessing. And in that new rhythm, their connection deepened, not despite aging bodies, but because of them. Let me say this clearly. After 60, your body is wiser than it's ever been. It knows what's safe, what's tender, what's needed. And when you learn to listen, really listen, that wisdom becomes your greatest ally in building a kind of intimacy most people only dream of. Now, you might be wondering, what happens when the body does say yes, but pleasure still feels different or even distant? That brings us to the second mistake. It's something many seniors never talk about, but it directly affects circulation, sensation, and emotional fulfillment, and it's fixable. But only if you understand this one truth about how blood, breath, and brain chemistry interact during physical closeness. Let's go there, because once you do, everything starts to make sense. Mistake 2, forgetting to breathe. Literally, most people don't realize this, but the single most powerful tool for enhancing intimacy after 60 isn't found in a supplement bottle. It isn't a special food or a secret technique. It's something you've done since the moment you were born. Breathing, not just shallow, unconscious breath, but full, open, rhythmic breathing, especially during moments of closeness. Let me explain why. As we age, many things change. Hormones, nerve endings, muscle tone, but perhaps the most overlooked shift is how the body regulates oxygen under pressure. When you become aroused, or even just emotionally activated, your heart rate increases, your blood vessels dilate, muscles tighten slightly, and all of it requires oxygen. In younger years, this happens effortlessly. But after 60, shallow breathing or unconscious breath holding during intimacy can reduce blood flow exactly when your body needs it most. And what does that lead to? For men, reduced stamina, weaker erections, delayed or absent climax. For women, lowered sensation, delayed arousal, discomfort. And for both, a sense of disconnection, like something just isn't clicking, even though the desire is there. I remember working with a couple, James and Eloise, both 71. They loved each other deeply, held hands in church, shared breakfast rituals every morning. But for months, they avoided any form of intimacy because, as James put it just wasn't working anymore. He thought maybe his testosterone was too low. She thought maybe menopause had changed her permanently. They tried creams, supplements, books. But what changed everything was a breathing exercise I gave them. Before any intimate moment, they would sit together, not touching, just breathing, slowly, in sync. 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out, focusing only on their breath. It seemed too simple, but within weeks, Eloise told me something she hadn't said in years. I felt like I had my body back. And James, his confidence returned. Not because he performed better, but because he no longer felt pressure to chase something. He simply let himself be present, with breath guiding the moment. When you hold your breath during intimacy, even unconsciously, you activate the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight mode. Blood rushes to your core, but skips the places that need it most. Your mind tenses, your heart races too fast. Your touch becomes rushed or disconnected, but when you breathe, everything softens. Touch becomes warmer, time feels slower, and intimacy feels like what it was always meant to be. A shared, connected experience, not a performance. So if you've ever found yourself frustrated after intimacy, or wondering why things feel off even when nothing is wrong, ask yourself this: were you breathing or were you bracing? The answer might surprise you, and the solution could be as simple as a breath. Now let's go deeper, because even when couples master physical connection, there's one invisible wall that can still stand between them. A wall built not by bodies but by words unspoken, fears unshared, and assumptions left to grow in silence. And this next mistake, it might be the most painful one of all, especially for those who've loved for decades but feel further apart than ever. Let's talk about it. Mistake 3, saying nothing. When something needs to be said, sometimes the silence between two people can be louder than words, especially when those people have shared a bed, a home, a life for decades. I once sat with a woman named Teresa. She was 74, a retired music teacher with kind eyes and a soft voice that trembled when she spoke of her late husband. But what struck me wasn't her grief, it was her regret. Not for the time they shared, but for what they never dared to say. "You know," she said, "he never asked if I liked it, and I never told him when I didn't." She paused. "I just thought that was how love worked. You give, you take, you adjust. And if something changes, you just figure it out alone." This is the third mistake, and perhaps the most painful one. The belief that after a certain age, there's no need to talk about intimacy anymore, that your partner should know. That silence is safer than honesty. But here's the truth. After 60, your body changes. Your needs change. Your boundaries shift. And if you don't speak them out loud, how will the one lying next to you know? Most people over 60 didn't grow up in an era where intimacy was openly discussed. They learned to be discreet, to be polite, to avoid discomfort, even with the one they love. But intimacy without communication is like dancing in the dark with your eyes closed, hoping the other person knows all the steps. It's only a matter of time before someone gets stepped on. And the worst part? Neither of you meant to hurt the other. You just didn't know how to speak. I remember a couple, Sam and Judith, both in their late 60s. They came to me not because something was wrong, but because they hadn't touched each other in over a year. Not even a hug. When I asked Judith why, her answer was heartbreakingly simple. "I thought he stopped wanting me." And when I asked Sam, he said, "I thought I was hurting her." Two people, living under the same roof, carrying pain in silence, each one assuming the worst, when all it would have taken was one vulnerable question. So I asked them to do something. Not touch, not perform, just sit across from each other, hold hands, and say one sentence. "This is what I need, and I'm afraid to say it because..." That one sentence changed their lives. Judith said she needed slowness, gentleness, presence. Sam said he needed to hear that he was still wanted, Even if things look different now, they cried, they laughed, and over time, they began again. But this time, with words. Let me tell you something I've learned from over 30 years of working with older adults. The most powerful kind of intimacy is the kind that comes from being seen, not just touched, seen. So if you're holding back words because you're afraid of rejection, remember this: your partner might be holding back the same fear, and if neither of you speaks, you'll never know what could have been healed. Say it, even if your voice shakes, especially if your voice shakes, because nothing kills intimacy faster than quiet assumptions. Now, there's one last mistake I want to talk about. And this one, it's the most misunderstood of all. It has nothing to do with performance, nothing to do with physical health, and everything to do with identity, who you think you are, and who you're still allowed to be, even now. Let's talk about the fourth and final mistake, and why, if you ignore it, you risk losing not just intimacy, but your very sense of self. Mistake 4. Believing you're no longer a sexual being. It's subtle at first. You stop looking in the mirror when you're undressed. You turn off the lights before getting into bed. You begin to use the word intimacy only in past tense, like a chapter that's been closed without your permission. And when someone flirts with you, even gently, even kindly, you laugh it off as ridiculous. This is the fourth and final mistake. The belief that because your body has changed, your desires must be retired. That because you've aged, your sensual self must be erased. Let me tell you this clearly. That belief is a lie, a cruel one. And it steals something far more precious than pleasure. It steals permission to feel, to express, to connect. I met Eleanor at a community workshop I was leading. She was 79, silver curls, piercing eyes, a wit sharper than most 30-year-olds I know. After I finished speaking about intimacy in later life, she raised her hand and asked, "Is it still okay to want to be touched, even if I'm alone?" The room fell silent. Then someone whispered, "Yes." Then another. And then the whole room nodded, because deep down, every person over 60 who has ever questioned their worthiness in this area knows, aging doesn't mean disappearing, it means evolving. Your body may move differently, your rhythms may shift, but your need to be seen, held, desired, and cherished, it never expires. And if no one has told you this lately, let me be the one. You are still allowed to feel, to want, to explore, to begin again. And if you've stopped doing that, if you've silenced that part of yourself out of shame or habit or some outdated rule society told you, then that too is a habit worth breaking. Because when you reclaim this part of yourself, not for anyone else, but for you, something remarkable happens. You stand taller, you speak more gently to your body, you show up in relationships not as someone who needs to be fixed, but as someone who still has something to give. And that is where real intimacy begins. So, let's go back to Margaret and Harold, to Clara and David, to James and Eloise, Sam and Judith, even Eleanor. What did they all discover? Not a miracle cure, not a performance trick, but a truth they had forgotten. That intimacy after 60 isn't about proving anything. It's about returning to something deeply human: connection, curiosity, tenderness, truth. And if you're willing to listen, to breathe, to speak, to pause, to rediscover who you are underneath the years, then I promise you, it's not too late. You haven't missed your moment. You're just arriving in a new one, and it might be the most beautiful chapter yet. If this video touched something in you, even quietly, please consider sharing it with someone who needs to hear it. A friend, a partner, yourself, because healing doesn't happen in silence. It begins in honesty. And today, that's exactly what you gave yourself. Thank you for being here. We'll see you in the next video, where we explore how to rebuild confidence in your body, even if it's been years since you felt at home inside it.